Hello everyone, thank you everyone for joining today for this webinar on, as you can see on the screen here, solving the rework headache in engineering. That's a dreaded topic that everyone's fearful of when it comes to projects. So we'll wait a couple more minutes for everyone to get started, but it might be a good idea for us to sort of kickstart the presentation today. We're going through a bit of a plan for it and we can get started following that. Perfect. Let me just go on to the next screen. So in the session today, guys, it's going to last roughly an hour. So if there's any questions that people have got, obviously put them in the chat box as we go throughout the session today. But what I want to cover today is the current project management sort of landscape for architecture, engineering and construction firms. You'll hear me refer to that a lot. So what we call it is the AEC. And what we want to do is obviously delve deeper into this, into what a single source of truth actually means and what it is and why is it so important. I'll then talk about how we can actually reduce the risks, delays and also rework by utilizing technology, which is obviously what we're here today to talk to you about, and how you can transform your information management with that all-important machine learning. So I think we'll get started. People are probably arriving in drips and drabs now. We'll get started. So I guess to start off, the technology landscape around us, as you're all really aware with things like ChatGPT and other things like this, is constantly ever changing and increasing speeds. And this is no different within the AEC industry, so architecture, engineering and construction. As I'm sure you've all noticed within your own work, that technology is continuing to rapidly evolve and drive the AEC to become safer, cheaper, and also quicker as well. And it's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now, that teams are either working remotely or in that sort of hybrid environment, or even just, as I'm sure lots of you are, working on site as well. That it's become with this, it becomes more and more difficult to actually access that project information. AEC professionals like yourselves who are on the call today rely on strong, consistent communication. This might take the form of pitches, winning clients, and the day-to-day communication with your colleagues. The days are sadly gone, albeit maybe mostly limited, where you can just turn around to the person behind you and ask them to help out with an email, for example. What this means for a lot of people is they don't have access to that information they need and are often left out of that communication loop. As you can imagine, this is a massive problem with over 347 billion emails expected to be sent and received every day next year. Email is the most used communication and collaboration tool around the world, but it's one thing that often people manage very differently. One of these risks comes in the form, of course, of that sort of dreaded rework. A recent study found that 80% of project professionals, so most of you are on the call today, spend about half their time on rework, and poor communication costs around $62 million on average every year. So rework doesn't obviously just waste time and money, but in some cases, it can cause huge communication breakdowns within your project team and also within your senior executive team and those sort of key stakeholders. So what have we done to find out a bit more about this? So what we've done here is we've run sort of our annual survey. We do it every year, which aims to discover the sort of project management and collaboration challenges that are facing businesses globally within the AEC. What the report does is it seeks to explore how firms manage the project information, where they store it, and how they go about retrieving data when facing those sort of dreaded, of course, legal disputes as well. We surveyed around 550 sort of AEC leaders across businesses all around the world and from varied roles within their organization, from CEOs all the way down to project leads as well. But what we'll do is we'll jump sort of straight into the findings. So I appreciate that's the exciting bit about today. So firstly, what we find is that most firms, or majority of firms, can't access their project information. So most of you on the phone today, on the call today, appreciate it, probably in this bucket as well. We found that only 10% of respondents, so a really small amount there, were not concerned about the accessibility and visibility of project information. So most people see this as a big challenge. In fact, only 2%, yeah, it's pretty low, 2% of respondents have never had a need to receive emails from projects in the past. Second sort of key finding we found is over a quarter of organisations are at risk when staff leave the business. So our research has found that more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as a part of the sort of standard offboarding process when people leave the business. In 2022, less than half of respondents, so that's around 44%, indicated that employees were required to file all project emails when they leave the business. This year, that number has risen a small amount to about 58%, which I think is great to see. There's still definitely room there to improve. So unfortunately, 28% of firms still don't require emails to be filed, and if it's the case, information is sadly lost. So thirdly, disputes, as I said at the start of the meeting, are rising year on year. In 2021, so we're going back a couple of years here, our report found that 63% of respondents, so a reasonable amount there, had experienced some form of dispute in the business within the last year. What we found with this year's survey is that report is actually, that sort of stat is actually risen to 91%, which is that's a massive increase in terms of 50% increase there in the amount of disputes. So the project scope changes and payments continue to be the leading cause of disputes, causing a majority of project scope information. A majority of project scope information resides in emails and formal documents. The firms that sort of work in a way of this cannot easily access this, and it's hardly surprising that we're continuing to dig ourselves into trouble by not having this information readily accessible. Finally, as I said in the last slide, emails is the most used communication tool across the sort of industry. More than 4/5 of respondents reported that their project correspondence via email is mostly via email, and only 19% of respondents use email for half their project correspondence. When asked about the information, sort of the business's reliance on emails, about 11% of people surveyed said that email is now the business critical sort of information of their organization, with most people agreeing that reliance on email has increased significantly in the last 12 months. So for the purpose of today's session, what I want to be focusing on with all of you today is that sort of dispute piece and that angle of our research. But what we will do is email you all a copy of this research report over the next couple of days so you can look into it in a bit more detail. So according to the World Bank, we're currently sharply slowing growth, only overshadowed by global recessions in 2009 and of course 2020 as well. In the AEC, we are seeing trends where costs are sadly on the rise and margins are tighter, and because of this, there are large staff sort of cutbacks on the horizon. Even larger firms report a huge drop-off in profits as their staff sort of costs are in fact actually increasing. Oh, I've gone to the wrong side there of accident. So with so much uncertainty, and so many people leaving the businesses, there is a strong need for organizations to really think about their email management and their information management across the business. How can all of you be sure that you can access all the documents and correspondence if the staff is to leave the business? So considering 28% of businesses do not have an email filing sort of way of working as a part of their offboarding processes, and 81% of firms use emails for a majority of the project correspondence, thousands and thousands of firms are at great risk of losing sort of project information. It's even more concerning, with this finding that 55% of those surveys indicated that they don't have any formal place for an email management system, or don't have anything in place at all. As I'm sure everyone on the webinar today has heard the sort of phrase where email is dead or we won't be using that in 10 years' time. I think definitely in our industry, what we found is these claims can be quite inaccurate. So in 2023, 88% of survey respondents indicated their overall volume of emails has actually increased in the last 12 months. This is a stark increase on the year before, and the contents of these emails are more important than ever, with 11% of people claiming that this is now business critical. On top of this, almost 2/3 of the AEC businesses regularly retrieve emails from past projects, with only 2% never having the need to find emails. So over the last 3 years on this research report, those numbers have stayed sort of relatively consistent, but also sort of rising the need of emails and the importance of those in the dispute as well. So many can relate to sort of not always needing to refer to previous emails. However, only 1 or 2% actually never need to find these last emails. For many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not the only consideration until things are not a consideration really until things have gone wrong. And as we can see, they hold vital information that could mean the difference between sort of winning a dispute and potentially saving all that money, but also losing a dispute and potentially paying settlement fees or going around that rework route as well. So unfortunately, what we are seeing is that project costs are continually to spiral, which has led to the increased number of disputes within the AEC. So going back to our research report for a second, what we found is that 9% of people surveyed had not experienced any dispute in the last 12 months. So a really quite small amount there. This is significantly higher than the previous 2 years of the sort of testing we've done with this research report. And it's beating the pre-pandemic record. So it's almost looking like after the pandemic, disputes are sort of on the rise here. 63%, as I mentioned earlier, of organisations have reported experienced a dispute in 2021. This number rose actually to 91% recently. So the top 2 causes for email disputes are project changes and also chasing payments. This sort of follows similar trends that we've seen in the previous 2 years of the research report. Unfortunately, the industry unfortunately for the industry, I beg your pardon, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. But sort of the question I always like to ask myself when a fact like that comes up is, why is this? Why is this the case? So what we found is a majority, so it's about 85% of information relating to scope changes are actually stored in emails and other formal documents. So to break this down even further, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in any digital space at all. So that might be a conversation on the phone or a conversation in person, and most of that, or 12% of that, isn't stored in any digital space. So the stat we're always shocked by is 11% of respondents, so not a massive amount, but a reasonably large amount of people in the AEC have highlighted that the only place that the information is kept is actually within the project manager's head. In 2020, pre-COVID, so going back to pre-COVID, this was around 6.2%, which shows an alarming increase of AEC firms not normally following sort of project scope changes, sort of recording project scope changes in the past 3 years. So as you can imagine, this heavily influences the amount of disputes that organisers face and can cause, as I said earlier, reworks as well. So with findings like these, it's hardly surprising that just over 90% of businesses are concerned about project information not being readily available or accessible. So we're constantly seeing that failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that result in a legal dispute. So one of the reports that we've actually lent on for this slideshow today is the Arcadis Global Construction Disputes Report. So Arcadis, I'm sure you're all aware of them as a business, they do a report every year. And what they found is that the global average dispute cost, I think it was last year, was $52.6 million US, with an average length of just over a year and a half. Firms can't afford to let really information and like email correspondence slip through the cracks when you've got costs like this that can rack up. So what we've seen and what we've sort of heard is a phrase called the leaky bucket of email negatively affecting the AEC firms globally. So firms must be aware that must be aware of their corporate history and being able to prove anything that has happened on project, especially when these stakes are so high as well. So a recent disaster that has sort of shaken the UK AEC industry was sort of devastating fire at Grenfell Tower in London, where sadly 72 people lost their lives. This is one of the UK's sort of worst modern disasters, as I'm sure you're all aware of what happens. I think some of you in the UK will be able to know what happened and know that the fire was caused by an electrical fault that spread quickly due to the highly flammable cladding that was used in the building. In the inquiry, pretty damning emails were uncovered indicating that certain parties were in fact actually aware that the cladding material that was used was flammable and unsafe. So with this in mind, given the nature of the industry that you operate in, firms need to guarantee information visibility and accessibility to ensure they are making the right decisions. Now, in the best cases, poor information management costs firms money, but as we've seen with Grenfell, the worst cases, it in fact actually makes people unsafe. So given the size of global disputes and the environment that it's in, the cost of mismanaging emails is immense, and also it includes a couple of key points. So information being locked away in people's inboxes, staff wasting time looking for the information they need to do their job effectively and well, but also staff leaving the business and going on holiday, but also a range of important information is now trapped in their inbox. I'm sure we've all been in that situation where someone's been away on holiday in the business, we can't find a crucial bit of specification or some costings because it's in their inbox. So with a proper email management process in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by the entire project teams. This will reduce the risk of rework and stop project disputes sort of right in their tracks. Plus, you have the information to hand down the line should any liability dispute arise. So that's been a bit of a quick overview. I appreciate I've rattled on a bit there of the mail manager sort of stated the AEC report we did last year. We'll send these out to you as sort of the full report in the next couple of days. So if you're interested to read it in more detail, get back to us with a few questions. But what does this mean for information management? How can we help for disputes going forward? So luckily for us, technology advancements are continuing to improve the way that we actually work. As we touched on earlier, AEC firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiency. So that might be in the form of VR, 3D printing, BIM modeling. What this means is you can identify errors before construction, for example. So BIM advancements mean that team members can all be on the same page. The use of BIM has seen several benefits across the AEC industry, including reduction of waste, improvement of collaboration, enhanced productivity, time savings, and of course, overall increased technology adoption. So it's improving safety across the industry and provide deep insights into sort of existing buildings as well. So while the new tech is making our lives easier and really sort of boosting the industry, it's hardly surprising and it's harder than ever to access sort of project information and ensure that teams follow the information management process. So we have access to a massive amount of information, both inside and outside organizations. This sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored within documents and correspondence, and it can often be quite inaccessible, as I'm sure you're all aware, stored in different applications or various departments. Information, as you all know, is the lifeblood of any project work, but it's only if it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated that it becomes a benefit. And this is sort of no easy task there. But what's the solution? What's the way we can solve this? I appreciate I've been sort of moaning on about how correspondence are managed badly. So what we find is that companies need a single place where you can access all project information and client information that is stored centrally. So you can have a complete picture of what is going on in any given project you're actually working on. So what you need really is a single source of truth. So it's a digital record, securely centralized, created to update and give people accessible information covering the entire building's life cycle, including design, construction, and also management, of course. So a single source of truth provides better working methods and encourages more transparent communication. This is helping organizations drive change faster without compromising that all-important quality that keeps our clients on board. And it ensures that all project and client teams have access to the correct information when they need it, and if they need it, of course, as well. So managing project information in one place is critical to avoiding disputes and rework. And when it's done right, it allows teams to make the use out of their time, resources and knowledge to make the right decisions at the right time. You might all be thinking that sounds overwhelming, but appreciate tech is actually on our side. The two easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing the manual process. So with an overly manual process, people aren't going to follow it, but also increasing information visibility across the board as well. So one thing to keep in mind is if your single source of truth is not fully complete, so if not everyone's put the right information into there, fundamentally it's not the truth. And a pretty harsh way of looking at it, but it's not the truth. What we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about their document and contracts, often email management is one thing that's left behind because everyone manages it differently. Without the right tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices. So some people will be really diligent filing emails to their Outlook folders. Some will save important information into their individual inbox to desktops. And others simply delete all information and don't see the need for sort of filing in any longer, which is definitely alarming for me, if not anybody else. In all these scenarios, that information is trapped in silos and accessible to the wider team. Inaccessible to the wider team, I beg your pardon. Losing access to essential emails or not including them on the overall information management strategy can prove to be detrimental to firms. When emails are managed correctly, however, everyone within the organization has access to the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time. It provides a much better way of working and encourages more transparency across the communication, ensures that all team members have access to all the information they need when they need it. Plus, it removes that responsibility of storing and managing data from one person or a department. So that sort of brings me on, I guess. It's time to avoid these common email headaches. So this wasn't what we agreed. When did you tell us this? Or John has left the company, so I'm coming to this a bit cold. That those sort of excuses have got to go because technology is on our side. So some of the benefits of a centralized information or centralized sort of repository for emails include your data becoming more discoverable, eliminating the human errors through automated workflows, establishing version control. There's just a couple that I've mentioned. You can see the rest on the slide there. But what we want to do is focus on that sort of single source of truth, ensuring that everyone's got access to the emails when they can access it. And that's where we come in with IdeaGen Mail Manager. So without talking ado, I appreciate I've been doing a lot of talking today, but I'll go on to the exciting stuff of how we can lean on technology and why you're all here today. So as I'm sure most of you on the call are aware of, the company called Arup Engineering. So if you haven't heard of Arup, they're a global consulting firm who have worked within the design and engineering space for tens of years, lots of years. And a couple of their projects on the screen here. But the reason why I bring Arup up is they actually created Mail Manager around 10 years ago internally. The reason being is mostly because of all the points I've just raised earlier. They had no control of their sort of staff project information. They tried to put a couple of processes in place. They tried to get people to manually drag and drop emails into those centralized project folders. But what they found is that people weren't doing that process. Information has been locked away in their inboxes, inaccessible, difficult to find, and even if they were filing it, they were wasting through those billable hours and contract hours and filing project emails. So what this meant for them is that project teams couldn't find the information they wanted quickly. So what they tried to do is go back into the industry or into the market and try and find a solution that would solve these issues. They tried to find sort of the easy way out, pluck something off the shelf as you and I would, and get something plugged in and get going. They couldn't find anything that was going to do this for them. So what they did is they went the complete opposite direction and developed Mail Manager in-house. And that's probably one of the best things I love about it is it's designed for project teams by a project team. We're fully aware of all the issues that people have with email management, and that's why the system was created and came about. So what I've done in here is I've just included a couple of our customers within the UK engineering there for you all to have a look at. I appreciate there's a couple of their sort of smaller firms dotted all around the UK, but also larger firms like Ramboll and Amy, sort of dotted sort of more globally as well. What I wanted to do is just focus on sort of one of our sort of longer standing customers that you might have heard of called Ramboll. So for those who haven't heard of Ramboll, they're an engineering consultancy firm around 17,000 employees across 27 locations globally. So Ramboll has a strong representation across the world, particularly in the Nordics, America, India, and the UK. This allows the company to pride itself on not just making a difference to its clients, but also its employees as well. As in the environment they work with is sort of global, really. But the reason why I bring up Ramboll is before Mail Manager, they were initially introduced to the business. So before Mail Manager initially introduced the business around 2009, Ramboll's project email management process was manual and very time consuming. This introduced a fundamental challenge in the regards to efficiency and consistency and the productivity of all their projects. So whilst the global offices were not working on projects together as such, each office had a number of projects they were working on with a team and needed to share information. And what they found is there's an element of inconsistency when having to access this project information. So a particular project member raised this internally as something that needs to be done. And as a first step, what they did is they went and had a look at sort of filing emails manually and being better at following a process internally. And what they found is that they became overwhelmed. There was too many emails to file away, and they didn't have enough time in the day to actually file the information, but also people weren't following that process internally as well. So what they did is they lent on, as I said earlier, the strength of software to actually to get the benefit of this. They actually came and introduced themselves to Mail Manager. What they did is tested it for a number of sort of weeks and about around a month's time, and it was quickly identified that this sort of would be a good system to drive consistency across Ramboll, whilst also reducing the risk of the risk of the company exposed in regards to compliance, and also reducing the risk of disputes and rework as well. So now Mail Manager is being heavily used across a number of offices across the globe for Ramboll, and as a solution developed 10 years ago, Ramboll was finding sort of massive benefits from this. In fact, it saved them time, but also reduced the importance or the reliance it has on the staff to file emails, making emails also really accessible and reducing the sort of cost of, if someone's away on a holiday, they can't find that email, or if there's a dispute and they need to find that sort of smoking gun email, it's reducing that cost as well. What I'll do is I'll go on to a demonstration in a second, which will make it far more clear on sort of the time savings, and also feel free to ask any questions throughout that as well. I just wanted to include a brief slide here as well, and a couple of other companies we've worked with as well. I'll just go through them very briefly. So Prochrome Engineering, they've been using Mail Manager. And it meant the firm that they were actually now compliant with their ISO 9001 certification, and their goals are sort of associated to that by standardizing their email management right across the business. And what we often find is email management is that missing piece of achieving that sort of ISO accreditation or some ISO accreditations, and often even showing something like sort of Mail Manager to an ISO consultant means that they're more than happy to sign off for that from an email management perspective. Going on to Niche Engineering, so they had a very funny story with us. But what they found is they saved about $10,000 in storage costs. So staff were sort of wasting countless hours of manually filing emails, but found that they were duplicating a lot of emails. And what we did is we introduced Mail Manager, deduplicated those emails, and it saved about a third on sort of information sort of storage, because we were able to sort of reduce the number of duplicates that were in the sort of storage system. And then it comes on to Brighter Engineering. So having all project and communication in a central location meant for them that everyone had access to the project information and they were all on the same page. So it meant that for them, it was more of a case of becoming less embarrassing to clients. They didn't want to sort of have that situation where they said, as I said earlier, I'm coming cold to this, or I've got no idea what you're talking about. Can you please send me or forward on me that email? What they didn't want is that embarrassment there. So I guess before I get on to demonstration, what I wanted to do is highlight a couple of key sort of problems that we aim to solve, that we aim to work with. So working left to right, everyone's on the call. So the risk of losing sensitive information is often a really big factor. And what I mean by that is it's less of a case of you'll never be able to find those emails. It's more of a case of the emails are locked away in silos, they're locked away centrally, and people can't quickly access it. So it's a bit like we know where the emails are in terms of the location of them, we just can't actually access them quickly. And that's what I mean by risk of losing sensitive information. Then obviously we've got wasted time spent searching and sort of manually filing emails. I think a lot of the industries we work with, whether it be architecture or engineering, they work with billable hours. And if you're wasting project sort of time on filing emails, that is essentially admin hours that you can't bill out to your clients, and it's spent manually filing emails. And what we often find is that people are spending 1 or 2 hours a week on filing emails and searching for emails, and that can typically be a really easy way to make those savings and increase the number of sort of project hours that people take on throughout a year. So lack of control as well is one that sort of always comes up, can mean lots of different things. But the way I always see it as is you internally have set a process in place. You've asked people to sort of follow a process of filing emails essentially, but what we often find is putting in place the process in place and getting people to actually follow it are two very different things. People don't actually tend to follow that process, and it tends to lead to emails being locked away and then a lack of control. So lack of control of what people actually do with their project emails. And then finally, bringing that last point of information being locked away or trapped away into people's inboxes and becoming very sort of inaccessible. So there's either a case of someone going on holiday, can't access their emails, it's trapped away there, or even someone leaves the business and the sort of GDPR means they can't access their emails, only certain people can access them, and it takes a lot of time to retrieve that information. So with IdeaGen sort of Mail Manager, we give our customers confidence, really, first of all, that any email has been filed, they can retrieve it straight away. The business can find any email in seconds. Your productivity will increase. And finally, you'll have one sort of centralized space, as I previously described it, a single source of truth for all of your product information, helping you create and maintain that sort of centralized location to access all of those emails. So without further ado, what I will do now is I will get on to the demonstration, show you all how the system works. As I go through it today, guys, I appreciate it's going to be a whistle-stop tour. But if there's any questions as I go on throughout this, stop, let me know. I can get those questions answered. But also, if it does become relevant, and if you're sitting there and thinking this does look really helpful, more than happy to organize a more in-depth demonstration. Go to our website. We're offering free trials as well. So feel free to go and download those and have a look at those as well. But without further ado, let me get on to the demonstration of Mail Manager. So hopefully you can all see my Outlook there, okay? What you will see here is that my Outlook won't look too dissimilar to yours or a standard Outlook. Mail Manager just adds these set of buttons up here to your taskbar. So from an implementation perspective, it's really quick, really easy to set up and get going. Doesn't require a big concerted effort to get working. The two sort of main aims of Mail Manager and what I'll show you today is how we file emails out of your inboxes to that sort of centralized project repository, but also how you can use this search tool here to use keywords, date ranges to actually retrieve these emails in 2 or 3 clicks and not waste any time. In terms of where we're going to file the emails to, we're not going to host the emails. We're not going to store them in our system. We're not even going to access them. We're going to store them directly onto your project management system. So your SharePoint, your file server, ProjectWise, those sort of locations, we're going to file directly into. So how do the emails actually get filed into them? So I take an email here from Zach. I'm going to say something like, thank you for the update. The client wishes to make some changes to the case. Please update invoice. So quite an important directional email there that usually gets sent out. And what we find a lot of companies in NEC, there's sort of 2 situations what happens here. One is it gets locked away in people's inboxes. Well, as soon as they send it, it's forgotten about. It's only inaccessible in there. The other option we often find is that people will send out emails and they'll go about the manual process of filing it away, which takes a lot of time up your day, but also still isn't overly accessible once it's actually been stored. So with Mail Manager, what we're going to do, as soon as anybody clicks send to an email, what they're going to be greeted straight away here is a prompt. Now, what that prompt does is drives consistency, gets everyone filing across the same way. But what it's also going to do is tell people exactly where to file away that email to. Now, that comes with predictions. So I can see here I've got about 4,500 sort of folders across my whole company. but it's brought right at the top of the list there, sort of 6 suggested locations with these stars. So what you can see at the top here is the highest suggested location. Now those suggestions come off the keywords are written on the email, but I know a lot of project-based teams don't put project numbers or project names on emails. So we're also going to take into consideration your past filing habits and a bit of machine learning there to understand where you like to file emails to from certain people to help the system suggest a location. So to put it to that Cap West location there, I'm going to click send in the file. That's going to send the email out to Zach and follow both copies of that email directly into the project folders for you. So what you're left with there is a copy in your inbox. Sent and received copy has been filed to the project folder. And this copy in your inbox has got an orange tag that tells you it's been filed away, and it's been filed away by Mail Manager for me to access later on. A couple of other ways a couple of other different ways to file here as well, but I'm sure I won't have time for that today, so I'll go into more detail that on a later call if you guys get in touch. So, I mean, the next question that always comes up is how do we access that information? So whatever a user gets here is a search tool to actually find all of these emails across all of the project folders. I've got the window just open here. What this does here is it gives me access to all of those emails across all of the project folders within the business. So I've got access to 600,000 emails here. Most of these I've not been involved in, but I can find all of the emails that I'm allowed to access through here. And what I mean by that is if I haven't got access to a project folder where the emails are stored, I won't be able to access it through here. So to give you an example, just going back to my slides earlier, as I mentioned, a lot of businesses in the AEC disputes rise from invoices or payments. So what I'll do is I'll talk everyone through how to find an invoice, for example, on a project if there is a dispute. So to give you an example, let's say someone's left a business 5 years ago. You need to find an invoice. It was sent a while ago. Their Outlook's been shut down and deleted. Usually alarm bells start ringing. How am I going to find that email? IT are going to take ages. It's a panic. So with Mail Manager, what you'll do here is you'll put in the keyword being invoice. That keyword there is going to bring up an email with that keyword there is going to bring up all the emails with that word in it. So it's not just going to search the subject line, but it's going to bring up all of the emails that says that word in it. So it's going to have from 600,000 emails there to 125. What I can then do is type in a key project like Gensler, bring up all of the emails with the word Gensler on it. I can say yes to attachment the attachment being on the email and leverage these folders on the left-hand side. What I can also say is that Georgina was included on that email. So I click on this email here, view the whole chain of communication, so find out what's been said, who said it, why it was said, and really easily access that information within 2 or 3 clicks. So what I've done here is not wasted any time. I've actually found the email, but also I can press that button there and actually utilize it to my advantage. So in a dispute, I can now forward on this email, just open it on my other screen. I can forward it on this email, share it internally, and send it out to other teams as well. So I appreciate, guys, that's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of Mail Manager. Let me go onto my other screen and I can stop sharing my Outlook. So with that, guys, it sort of brings to the end of sort of what I wanted to run everyone through today. So what I want to do now is open up the floor to a couple of bits of Q&A and get those sort of questions answered. So I'm just going to open up the chat function. If you want to put your chats in it, guys, we can get those answered today. Give me 1 second. So we've had one question come in here. So where are the emails filed to? Always a big question is where do they actually go? The panic is always averted when I say something like we don't store the emails. They're all stored within inside your own project folders. So what the system you guys have got at the moment for storing documents, attachments, invoices, we're going to create typically an emails folder within inside each project folder, and that's exactly where the emails are going to be filed away into. So the important things to highlight is we'll never access the information. We'll replicate the permissions that are in place in your system, but also it means if you not many people do, but if you do choose to leave Mail Manager, you'll still be able to access all of the project information. We don't sort of hold it hostage or anything alarming like that. Another question that's coming here, I'm just going to read them out as I go along. When people leave, what's the process? So always a big sort of question here. So if people do leave the emails, leave the business, you'll still have access to all of their emails, and those emails are actually stored within inside people's sort of project, so inside the mailboxes. So I beg your pardon, get my words muddled up here. So the emails that are actually now stored on the file server or on SharePoint, so centrally on the project folders, you can delete their Outlook, you can delete all their emails, but you'll still be able to access all their emails that have been filed centrally because they've been using that mail manager prompt. They've been making sure that all of the emails have been filed centrally. And then with that search there, you can leverage that to actually retrieve the information and make sure that it's easily accessible, and then you can actually use it as well. Just going to go on to another question here. So how does Mail Manager manage permissions? Yeah, always a good question. I think the most alarming thing that always comes up is what happens if people file something they shouldn't file, or what happens if I file one of my paycheck emails? Always a big question that comes up and can be quite alarming. So the easier way of looking at it is if you can't access a folder centrally at the moment, you won't be able to access it with Mail Manager. So the obvious example for that is HR emails, for example, or IT. If you can't access those emails centrally, you won't be able to find out what all your colleagues are being paid and that sort of thing, because that folder is restricted to you on the search as well as centrally as well. But likewise, every user will get their own sort of central filing location, their own personal filing location, I beg your pardon, where they can file emails to, and only then will be able to access those emails. Another question that's just come in here is, what happens with duplicate emails? So yeah, I mean, as I said, with niche engineering, I mean, duplicate emails is always a really big issue, not only with increasing the number of sort of space that people waste on storing emails, but also it tends to be a case of just making emails more inaccessible because you can't find the emails later down the line, or there's too many copies of them, it's taking too much time to do so. So what we do with duplicate emails really simply is we don't duplicate them, we deduplicate them altogether. So each email gets filed with a date and time stamp, who sent it, who received it, and the first 50 characters of the subject line. So what this does, avoids any duplication and makes sure you can still find the emails later down the line. Have access to the whole chain of communication, not have a case of, oh, I've tried to save over that past one or anything like that. It makes it nice and simple for you as well. So another emails here in the question of what happened with sensitive emails. I appreciate I've probably answered that one already. So question in here from Carl. As work from home makes it more difficult to easily turn to a colleague and ask for help, it begs the question, why such a push for work from home when clearly it can be as effective, to be more effective in the office? It is not a cut and a dried argument for or against, but as is now a thing, is email really ever going to die? Always a big question, Carl. I think what we always find is that email management typically never dies. I think emails tend to be sort of locked away in people's inboxes, and even if people start pivoting towards Teams, which I think a lot of people are doing, Teams messages are just like it in sort of email mailboxes. You know, you send a message to your colleague in a specification or a change of scope or something like that, those Teams messages still locked away within those Teams chats and aren't accessible internally. So, funny enough, what we do is we're fully aware that not all the information is on emails. So what we've actually come up with is the Teams chat filer. So what this does is it gives people the ability to not only file Teams messages into the project folder. So if you have an internal Teams chat or even an external Teams chat, you can file those Teams messages directly into project folders, but also use a search tool to actually search for those emails later down the line. If there is a dispute that arises, you can find those Teams chat messages and you can file all of them. The way it works is you can file not just one Teams message, and you have to go through each one individually, which would take far too much time. You can really easily just press a button, set a default of how many you wanted to file, whether it be 10 prior, 10 post your message, and we can sort of save those all, but also search them as well. I'm just going to go to some more questions. Give me 1 second. So one question that always sort of typically comes up is how easy it to actually sort of access it, or how easy to start using Mail Manager. So the way we always describe it is Arab built Mail Manager as if they wanted to buy it themselves. So it's really easy to implement. It's really easy to get up and going. Typically, we say it takes an hour and a half to get set up. Once it's set up and people are using it, it's usually a case of just making sure the training is all down to the point. And that's why we do training sessions as well, making sure people are using the systems to its full ability, but also people actually know how to use it as well. But the system's really easy to set up, and we always describe it as a quick win to a big issue. You know, email management's a big issue. If it's not organized properly, then emails are going to be inaccessible and difficult to find. So what we're going to make sure is email management is going to be a quick fix with Mail Manager, and it's the day after it's installed, people are going to start seeing the benefits straight away. So what is the retention time for email storage with attachments? Yeah, good question there. So we, by default, will leave the attachment on the email. We want the emails to have the true and accurate record. And the way to have the true and accurate record of what's been said is by leaving the attachment on it. The reason why we leave the attachment on it as well is while someone's attached an email, puts an attachment to an email, often there'll be content in the email that relates to that attachment. So something like it says, please check page 5 this document, or please review this this subparagraph, or this sort of content here. That's why it's really important to ensure that we file the attachments with the email. With that, you can also actually access the attachments with the search tool as well. So you can find the email that has attachment on it and actually open that attachment straight away and find out, when you find the email, what's been said in relation to that attachment in question. But good question there. So the information manager still needs the email to be working / active to access the required information. Let me just read that again. So the information manager still needs to. So I presume that question there. So let's read it out one more time so it's very clear to everyone. So the information manager still needs the email to be working and active to access the required information. So I think this question probably surrounding when people leave the business, do we need to have their email inbox still active? The answer is no, because obviously what we don't want to do is have a case where you've got lots and lots of Outlook accounts that you're still paying for, you're still running, that you're having to sort of keep going. And what we often find is businesses, before they use Mail Manager, they are paying for mailboxes just so they can have the information easily accessible, when they could be closing those down and potentially be saving thousands there on closing those mailboxes down. So if someone leaves a business, because they would have been using Mail Manager, all of their emails will be consistently filed throughout their tenure directly into the project folders, so that if they do leave, you can shut down their Outlook, delete all of the emails, and you'll still have the Mail Manager search tool to find all the emails. The search tool is not going to search the emails that's on their Outlook. It's going to search the emails that they've chosen to file away to the project folders centrally. But always a really good question there. Does Mail Manager link to SharePoint? Can messages be filed directly to SharePoint? So yeah, SharePoint is increasingly becoming a really important sort of storage tool for the AEC. And with that, a lot of emails are wanting to be filed directly into SharePoint. What we find at the moment is SharePoint's a bit fiddly. Filing emails into it isn't as easy as people would like. In an ideal world, you have it sort of press a button, it files emails into SharePoint, but really in real terms, you drag and drop emails there. You have to change the name because it's already a name with the same subject line. It's really fiddly, and even searching for it, you're just searching for what someone's labeled the email, which can be absolutely anything. No, emails from clients can be labeled anything. So what we do is we can file emails directly into SharePoint. We'll file emails into a project folder's email subfolder is where we'll file emails into, or what we can also do is file emails into sort of an emails directory on SharePoint. So it's completely up to you guys how you want that structure and how you want the emails to be filed into it. But you're absolutely right. We can file directly into SharePoint, and I'd probably say a large majority or large amount of our customers are actually using SharePoint today for their sort of email management process and ensuring they've got it all kept in one place. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want to have is email stored in one location, project documents stored in another. We want to unite the two and make sure it's all accessible into one sort of centralized repository. Cool. Let me just see if there's any other questions that have come up here. 1 second. So I think I've got a question here. What happens to incoming emails, ones you don't need to reply to? So the way it works, the incoming emails is really simple. So you open up the email. Once you've read it, once you've done your sort of work that you need to do on it, you can then choose to close that email down. Once you then close that email down, you'll then be prompted in a very similar way to I've just shown you here with sending emails. You'll be prompted to file away the email directly into the correct project folder, and also then quickly accessible, have it accessible as well. So what that means, because I appreciate emails that come in are just as important as the emails that are sent out. What that means is that emails are going to be consistently filed. People are still going to follow that process. People are still going to follow sort of file, not just sending emails, but also incoming emails. And also then you've got a really good search tool to actually access this information as well. Had another question that's just been typed into the chat here as well. If there's any questions that go throughout this, guys, put in the chat, I can get those answers. But what happens, I guess one question that's coming here is, what happens in the implementation? How is it set up? So what we do here with the implementation is we sort of roll it across one person's machine. Once it's set up on one person's machine, we actually push out to all the users via whatever policy you use, or we can push out per machine, or whatever sort of group policy you use to push out software. So that can be Intune or something like that. And what we do is we'll just package up the installer, put it in Intune, send it across to all the users. And the best way of looking at it is they'll open up their laptops one morning, their machines one morning, and they will see Mail Manager in their ribbon. So very little downtime there to actually get people up and using the system. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that this is a really quick fix to a big problem. Without playing down the system too much, it's fairly lightweight, which is part of the beauty of it. It makes it really easy to use, but also easy to implement as well. Another question that's just come in here is do you have a sort of trial of Mail Manager? Yeah, always a good question to ask, and I'm pleased to hear that it's becoming relevant to people and I've done a good job showing the system. So there is the ability to download a free trial. Actually, you can download that directly off our website. What we will do is if you do that, we'll give you a quick call just to make sure everything's set up okay. Obviously, we want our trials from a selfish perspective to be as successful as possible, to ensure that sort of people actually do sort of look further into Mail Manager. So download the trial off our website. Definitely have a look at it. It's a really good example of a really good way to see how it works in your situation, your environment, get testing it, but also, I know it sounds really obvious, but actually see if it works within your sort of technical environment as well. If there's any questions you go throughout that, get in touch with us. I'm sure we'll send an email across after so you've got our details. But also we can answer those questions and have a call with you to help set that up as well. Another question that's just come into here is how do the demonstrations work? So how we can find out more about this? So what we do here is we can do demonstrations on Mail Manager. So whilst the one today was probably a little whistle stop tour, what we tend to do after this is we'll send across information. If it does become relevant, get in touch with us. We'll probably give you guys a call, check in if it's a good fit, and we can organise a demonstration. With those demonstrations, what we do is we sort of do a tailored session, show everyone exactly how it works. And feel free to invite anyone who you want from your business onto those calls. We can show that system works, but also understand how we can progress this further and sort of tend to do sort of more regimented trials where we can have more of a structure in terms of get training people, train users how it works and that sort of thing as well. Cool. Let me just have a look at my questions that come up here. What happens, just read this one here. What happens if you misfile an email? So I appreciate the question, and why this has probably come up is, and I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, is accidentally filing a paycheck or a healthcare document to a public location that everyone can access, or a project folder that actually you should have filed to a private location. I've definitely been guilty of that one before. So the best way of looking at it is there's two options here. One is, within every single user's machine, what they have access to is a prompt. A box at the top there says status. In that status box, they have a full list of all of the emails they've filed. And what you can do is click on one that you've misfiled and choose to file it or move it or even copy it to a separate location. which is really easy to ensure that makes, if you actually file something centrally or not centrally, you can move that after the fact as well. But also the other option is you can actually find it on the search, and as long as you've got permission to move it, you'll be able to move it from the search as well. So we manage the permissions on the search. You won't be able to delete or move emails if you don't have the access to do that centrally, sort of in the repository as well. Cool. Coming on to another email here sorry, another question, I beg your pardon. Emails on my mind. Can we file emails to multiple locations? For example, if I'm working on a project with a client that is working on multiple projects with me, can I file it to multiple project locations? Absolutely, you can. So you receive an email. Let's say, I think emails from clients, definitely the email chain can start off talking about project A and then later on talk about project B. We can actually file these emails to multiple locations. So on that prompt, really simply, you can check a couple of tick boxes and ensure that you can file those sort of emails into multiple locations to ensure that you can still access it, and not have it locked away in one project folder. You can file it to multiple. Probably linking with that last question, I think this may have come from the same person, is can you search multiple locations? So with the search tool, likewise with filing emails, we can actually search multiple locations. So whilst they're stored into individual sort of project email folders, you have got the access to actually search all of the emails in one go. So on that search tool, there's the ability to filter down by project. You can select multiple projects to search through. So if you get an email from a client or a consultant or a contractor, you can search those multiple projects at once. But also, you don't even have to put a project name in there at all. You can search for any project all at once as well. I'm currently going to read another question here. I've probably only got time for a couple more. So I'm currently using categories for my emails, where I categorize emails depending on the particular topic of the project. For example, invoices, payments, but also legal as well. Is there ability to categorize emails that are filed to the centralized project email location? Yeah, so the easy answer is obviously, of course, yeah, we can do that. We have got sort of categories that allows you to categorize emails, and you can set sort of predetermined categories for people to follow. With those categories, obviously it requires you to actually follow them. We typically say that categories is often not a crucial factor, really, because the search tool is so detailed and you can use sort of keywords to find emails, and not just searching for the subject line. Whilst categories can be really helpful for some businesses, some people might find it a little too complicated, or not complicated, but sort of time consuming to save emails. So if you're in a business where you can just use keywords and search the contents of the email, categories may not be relevant, but likewise, we speak to a lot of firms who need categories to differentiate between different clients or even sort of sensitive emails versus not sensitive emails, and they can do that as well. But it's a really good option here to do. What I will do is I'm going to read through the last question now, guys, and that is, is there a way of informing people that I've reviewed the email, or I've read the email, or there's a new email that has come into the project folder? Yeah, so we've got a really helpful tool that allows you to actually sort of notify those who find the email that it has been reviewed internally. As I said, this may be a feature not everyone wants to do, but it's a really helpful one if you do want to do it. So press a button once you save an email, you can sort of notify those who are going to access the email that the email has actually been reviewed, and it can then be it sort of amends the subject line that it's been reviewed at a certain date by a certain person, and then you can then also search that email as well once it's been reviewed. Cool. I appreciate there's a few more questions here to left unanswered. Great to see there's been so much interest in Mail Manager. I'm pleased to hear that. But if you guys have got any more questions on this, I'll probably start wrapping up now. If you've got any more questions on this, feel free to get in touch. I'm just thinking I've got another slide in here with our details at all. So yeah, there's our website there with the free trial. Get in touch with us, get some information, and we'll also continue to organise a time to answer your questions or sort of tailor it more towards you. But thank you, sort of leaves me to say thank you very much, everyone, for coming along to this sort of session today. If there's any questions going forward, get in touch, and yeah, we'll hopefully speak to you all in the future. But thank you very much.